Okay, so I'm Roma Patel. I'm from the research team, and for the research for this particular project, because we're looking at researchers in art and design and researchers in video ethnography and researchers in historians as part of the research community that's working on this project, we're looking at how narrative can be told through augmented reality. And with an exhibition like this, the augmented reality is, it's difficult to have a kind of linear story being told as part of the riots. So, because you have an entrance, you have 1, 2, 3 entrances in this in the exhibition, so that people will come to the stories at different points in view. And that was one of the first challenges, really, to make the stories, each of the stories, so that they can be then in some way work by themselves but also connect to all the other stories. So for example, this one, which is Riot versus the mob, we were looking at very much theatrical techniques so that we've got a frame around the image and getting Riot to talk outside the frame. Now this was something that we kind of developed over time, because it took a little while when we were working with this particular piece. First of all, in terms of the limitations and so on. But Riot basically has become like a narrator in this particular one, telling the stories, adding some interactive bits to it so that we can then move the story along as we look at it. The other thing with augmented reality is that you can move closer in and observe the character, or you can move further away and observe the character, the story as well. So it gives you the opportunity to move and look within and outside of the frame of reference, so that the story can then change. You have the ability to change that and the level of interaction you can have. There are other stories, for example, that will be slightly different. So for example, in terms of this model here, what we were looking at in particular was to kind of tell us a different type of story. And this one in particular was to look at telling the story of how augmenting it as a fourth wall, like you would do in theatre. So you are the audience looking at that within that sort of more theatrical setting. And this one in particular works really, enlarging it by going in or moving away from it. We can then see a sort of historical reference to the room, but also we can find out what was happening at the time of the riots, and that story being told within that realm. So the augmentation for each one of the different pods, we then consider that in terms of we consider the differences in terms of each narrative. The iPad, the relationship of the iPad is different to the object. And so, for example, in this particular one, watching from the window, for example, we can see watching from the window has 2 levels. So we are looking at a story being told here, where we could sort of almost go into here, looking at the night of it with this is a painting by Henry Dawson, and seeing the story. This also adapting the eyewitness accounts for this particular one, and looking at how we can then sort of create the sort of atmosphere of that story. Now the iPad then, again, it's the idea of being able to zoom in or zoom out and look at the environment around you as well, because you are augmenting within the space. So the space is very important in aspects of this particular one. So for example, we are moving down here now to look at this particular scene of the characters. Now with your iPad, once you can then almost do that, and you can see and zoom into the characters as well. and look at the exchange that happened on the street. And this was from their eyewitness account. And so we were interested in the different views. So here you're augmenting, we always seeing the tapestry in this particular one as we move around. And we can look at the different views. We can pull out, like if you were working on a sort of filmic, looking at film, it means that you can zoom in or zoom out, and the objects are there. So each one of these, we were able to look at how and moving around, because this is a three-dimensional object, one could move around and look at different aspects of that that object and see the different interpretations of it. So I think for our research, we are particularly interested in that aspect of it, how augmented reality can be used to tell stories.